Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's 2 o'clock, and welcome to the Planning Committee. And the first item on our agenda is any apologies for absence. I know we had a few.
Yes, Chair, I've had apologies from Matthew Bailey, Sarah Keaton and Andrew Williams.
Yeah. Thank you. No others? No. Okay, thank you. Item 2 then is any disclosures of personal and prejudicial interests. Any? No. Thank you. And item 3 is to approve and sign the minutes of the previous meeting as a correct record. And that's at page 1 to 3. So go to page 1. Page 2. And page 3. Okay, thank you very much. It is a true record. Next item, any items for deferral or withdrawal?
No, Chair.
There are none. Good. And item 5 is the determination of planning applications under the Town and Country Planning Act of 1990. And the first item on our agenda there is on page, item 1 is on page 7, is the land west of Llangyfelach Road in Tydau. And that is your Simon, yeah?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Just refer you to the update sheets. There are updates to this application. Within the conditions of outline permission section of the officer's report, several of the conditions that have been considered under this application were omitted due to a formatting error. As noted on the update sheet, these relate to potable water, tree impacts and protection measures, public art strategy, and landscape implementation and management plan. So those were considered under this application, but were just not included on the final report. It's also recommended that a further condition is added should the development be approved relating to the removal of permitted development rights for householder extensions in the interests of drainage and residential amenity. Okay, Ian, if you could put up the first slide showing the red line. Thanks. This proposal is reserved matters application for the LDP strategic site at land west of Llangyfelach Road called SDD. The applicant's name for the site is Pentref Rostia, which translates as Moorland Village. The application was submitted in 2019 and there have been extensive dialogue and discussions with the applicant to evolve and bring forward a scheme that will provide a high quality new community that reflects strong placemaking and green infrastructure principles. Members may recall outline planning permission was approved at the site in October 2019 for the development of 1,950 dwellings, including a new two-form entry primary school, local centre, public open space, pitches and associated works. The outline permission approved details of 2 strategic access points for the development, to the north off Llangyfelach Road and to the south off Mynydd Newydd Road. The outline was subject to a Section 106 agreement which secured matters in relation to affordable housing with 15% across the site, pitch provision, play provision and contributions in relation to education, public transportation, off-site highways improvements, maintenance of open space, ecological management, public rights of way and active travel improvements and watercourse improvements. Within the outline, there is a requirement for the submission of a sub-area master plan prior to the submission of this reserved matters application. Given the vast scale of the outline site, this provided for an additional layer of detail to inform this reserved matters. The sub-area master plan was approved in 2019. Turning to this development, Ian, if you could go to the next slide. This reserved matters application includes the following elements. 471 dwellings in the northern part of the strategic site, with 336 units within phase 1A to the south and 135 dwellings within phase 3A to the north. Phase 0 would be the strategic spine street running through the site, linking the approved strategic access points to the north and south. The development comprises a mix of 1 to 5 bedroom units, flats and dwellings, including 71 affordable dwellings, which is 15% of the total number of units, provided as 35 low-cost home ownership and 36 social rented. Active travel routes are proposed along the Spine Street from Penplas Road to the Welcome Inn Mynydd Bach Chapel area. Open Open space and play space would be provided in accordance with the Section 106 for the outline, which is one local landscaped area of play, one locally equipped area of play, and one local area of play within each phase. These are incorporated within 6 parks together with a trim trail and junior bike track. The application was advertised in the press and by site notices. One letter of objection has been received. These concerns have been set out in the report and generally relate to flooding on Penplas Road and its potential use for construction traffic. In terms of LDB policies, there's a raft of policies that are relevant to the consideration of this proposal, and these are set out within the committee report. Key policies are considered to be the site-specific strategic policy for this site, SDD, and policy PS2, placemaking and place management, together with topic-specific policies relating to highway safety and the environment. In terms of the main issues, outline permission has been granted. Therefore, the principle of the development and the strategic access points to the north and south are acceptable and have been approved. The main issues in terms of the consideration of this application, therefore, is whether the submitted scheme would accord with the national planning policies and LDP policies in relation to placemaking, impacts upon residential amenity, highway safety, affordable housing, and the environment generally. You go back to the red line plan, Ian. In terms of the site and surroundings, you can see the site location plan in red, with the residential phases to the north accessed off Llangavelach Road. The site comprises primarily agricultural land set aside for grazing and areas of unmaintained grassland with occasional hedgerows. Broadly, the site lies on the crown of a small hill. The levels rise up from the northern access, then within the site drop down more steeply towards the north Penplas Road and more gently to the south towards the Welcome Inn and the southern access off Mynydd Newydd Road. Next slide, please, Ian. This shows the aerial image of the site without the red line, with the access points annotated together with existing community buildings at the Welcome Inn and Mynydd Bach Chapel. Penplas Road to the north and Llangavelach Farm within the site, which is being demolished. Marston Crem is to the northeast. Next slide, please, Ian. At the top of the page is the area of the northern access of Llangavelach Road that is the approved access. At the bottom is the southern access of Mynydd Newydd Road. I'll hand over to Steve Smith now to discuss the placemaking aspects of the scheme.
Hello, councillors. Hope you can all hear me okay. I think so. Said a yes. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, councillors will recall that I often assist development management colleagues where there's a strategic site to clarify and explain the main placemaking green infrastructure aspects. So that's why I'm on this presentation here today. So before we go into the detail of the proposals that have resulted from positive collaboration with Landmore Homes and their team, I think it's just important to take a step back just with this one slide, just to remind ourselves what is placemaking. So the quote at the top of the page there with the blue background is from Planning Policy Wales. This applies to all planning authorities across Wales in all locations. So I won't read the quote out, but just to pick out, it's the importance of a holistic approach, bringing together planning and design, focusing on positive outcomes. And the outcomes would be high quality development, public spaces, and the key assessments would be promotion of prosperity, health, happiness, well-being in the widest sense. So a very strong emphasis that as the planning committee, you're making decisions today that will be legacy decisions for many, many generations to come. So that's the importance of what we're doing here today. And the key, the placemaking, this mechanism, this process, this agenda of placemaking, the key reason why it exists in Welsh planning law is to deliver the objectives of the Wellbeings of Future Generations Act, the goals as the bottom of the screen there, the round chart there, those interlocking goals. They are delivered through the placemaking process. And you will also be familiar with the 5 ways of working, which sits just above that circular diagram there. And the key element of those ways of working I would highlight for today would be collaboration. The scheme before you today is the result of positive collaboration. It significantly improved the proposals, which significantly improved the place and significantly improved the likely outcomes for future communities and residents that are going to be in these places for many, many generations. So that's the importance of why we work together in these ways. Bringing it back down to Swansea, this is all brought together in LDP policy PS2, which focuses on placemaking, which you pretty much would hear referenced in every planning committee report, which is the key overarching policies. I hope you'll also all be aware that Swansea is a signatory to the placemaking charter for Wales, which sets out 6 principles of placemaking around mixed uses and densities and active travel, all the key things that we know make up the essential ingredients of successful places. Another key aspect of that is an overarching emphasis on what's called green infrastructure, which is more than just the landscape, which is nature, ecology, and the way that as humans we interact with these areas overall. It's about striking that balance, as that diagram in the bottom center highlights. And finally, it all comes together at the local level in Swansea. Oh, we've just lost something there. It all comes together in the local level in Swansea in our adopted supplementary planning guidance focusing on placemaking guidelines for residential developments there, which was approved about a year ago via planning committee. Okay, next slide, please. So as Simon mentioned, this site is a key strategic site in the local development plan. It's the largest of the strategic sites. The sheer scale of the site can be seen on the screen there, stretching between the communities of Llangollen and Penderry to the south there. It includes extensive green infrastructure, a 1.5 kilometre long spine street, a new local centre and school, higher density development, many houses and lots of green space, pitches, park areas and the like. So this is the strategic diagram set out in the local development plan, and which goes with a whole policy framework for the site. If we can have the next slide, please, Ian. And this is the approved master plan for that entire site. You can see how closely that follows that concept plan from the previous slide there. And to give an idea of the scale of the site, as I mentioned, the spine street that wends its way through the site, which certainly is not a bypass. The spine street is a key active street lined with building frontages and green infrastructure, which we'll come on to. The scale of the site could be for up to 1,950 new homes. So that's the outline capacity. The application before you today is for the first phases of that development of 471 homes. If we could have the next slide, please. And on this slide here, I've just grayed out the master plan just to highlight the specific parts diagrammatically of the site that the application here today, as Simon has described before, is the areas north and south of the eastern end of the spine street and the entirety of the spine street coming through to the Penderry end, which will open up that wider site for future development in further years. And if Ian could just maybe highlight the location of the local centre and the school using the cursor there to the south. So that's the future location of the school and local centre, which you'll see is immediately adjacent to the application before you today. If we could go on to the next slide, please, Ian. So as you heard earlier, because of the sheer scale of this site, we haven't just jumped straight from the very strategic outline planning application stage to the detail of the reserve matters. On this scheme specifically, there's been this intermediate stage called the sub-area master planning stage, which was addressed via condition. And at that intermediate stage, a series of parameter plans were established for the phase before you today. So these are diagrams, and you would have heard me say this before, that in some instances set out fixed elements of what the new place should be, and in other elements set out what should be flexible elements. And the diagrams on the screen there deal with aspects such as building heights, such as street hierarchy, which ensures active travel, connected streets and networks for pedestrians and cyclists. And the one on the far right there addresses townscape, the key building frontages and corners and all the sorts of things that the visual manifestations of the new place. And what this does do, this strategic approach to sites, the time it takes to get from diagrams to detail allows for this positive collaboration and dialogue. It's all about working closely with the developer and their team to ensure these schemes are high quality and they can be delivered. Next slide, please, Ian. So this is the overall site plan. I'm not sure how it's showing on the screen where you are in the Guildhall today. There are other detailed plans coming along. This is just to remind us of the sheer scale of this application before you today. 471 new homes, ranging in size from 1-bedroom flats up to 4-bedroom houses. You've got the portion of the 1.5 kilometre long new Spine Street. You've got 2 significant new neighbourhood parks, as well as significant other areas of open space and the play provision that Simon referenced before, which will fit into the extensive green infrastructure network. There's the linkages. All of these streets connect up for cycling and walking. So they might be cul-de-sacs for vehicles, but you can easily walk and connect through this area. That isn't just for the new residents. This area will be accessible for the entire wider community. So these parks will be open to everyone, and that will be fantastic. There's old tramway lines that are reopened as cycling routes. There's links down to Mynydbach Chapel in the south, and there's links down to Welcome Inn Pub in the south as well. So next slide, please, Ian. Thank you. So I've got a sequence of 3 slides now, zooming in a bit more on that plan to show the kinds of places that are being created. So you can start to see here from this plan here, we've got streets that are well defined by active frontages. That's the front doors and windows of houses facing the streets. The parking is positively integrated and not dominant. It's generally tucked down the sides of the houses there. You can see there's street trees. And generally, the more trees there are, the more important, the more busy the streets they are. So it helps you to find your way around, what's called legibility. It also means that most houses have either got a view of a tree or they're close to a tree. The importance of living in and around and close to nature. You can see how the streets all connect up. It's easy to walk to the parks. It's easy to get between homes. It's easy to get from the bus stop, which is on the Spine Street at the bottom of the site, to the wider area. You can also see on the junction there at the bottom of the site where the Spine Street meets the next road coming north, there's a block of flats in an L shape there. Maybe Ian could highlight that. So this shows you how the scheme has mixed accommodation. So there's flats there alongside all sorts of different size houses as well. So definitely seeking to create a truly mixed and balanced community with the access to these parks and open space areas. Next slide, please, Ian. This is the middle of the site here. The same built form principles as before, those strong building lines. I also mentioned there's some very positive approach to corner turning buildings, as we would call it. These are houses with windows on 2 elevations, on the front, on the side. So they're not blank, they're not oppressive, they're welcoming, and it makes the streets feel safer to have corner turning buildings. We can see frontages onto the new Spine Street area wrapping round, and also how some of the more incidental, some of the more local spaces are created around retained trees. I think there's a space here in the middle of the site there called the Pines, where there's an important clump of trees. They're all kept as a space, there we go, Ian's highlighting it there, as a space at the heart of the new community. So the key approach that we've got in Swansea is retaining and working with the nature, the green of the site. If we can go to the next slide, please. And again, the southern part of the site here, same built form housing principles as before. I've highlighted here the connections to those existing local facilities. You've got Mynydbach Chapel there in the south, highlighted in orange. You've got the Welcome Inn Pub highlighted in blue. So these will be, and you can see there's a grey route linking through there, which is a pedestrian cycle route, active travel. So you're connecting the new residents to the existing facilities and the wider community into the site via links such as that. Next slide, please. So we've talked about green infrastructure. The image on the screen here is twisted slightly from north, so it's the same site but kind of twisted to the side. So the green infrastructure isn't just about the parks, it's about retaining those natural assets the site already has. There's a number of field boundaries, there's a number of clumps of trees that I've already mentioned, and weaving them into the new place. So it's about living with nature. So it's about people, it's about environment, and it's about the landscape as well, and it's about the longevity of these places. And we know the importance of green and well-being and making sure the legacy of the future is fully addressed. So next one, please, Ian. In terms of the parks, there's these very significant 2 new neighbourhood parks. The park in the north is going to be called Park Calon Lan. You can see it on the screen there. It includes extensive new play equipment. It includes retained vegetation, new habitat creation. It slopes down towards the north, down towards the old retained Pen Place Lane. It will include drainage attenuation areas that are generally dry and will only fill up when it's raining. It's faced at the south end of the site there on the sort of where there isn't any colour on the screen, but the new houses overlooking, supervising, making sure this new space is safe. And the kind of the green and grey black lines are some of the new walking routes, footpaths through the area there. So fantastic new park being created, and this is just one of them. The next slide, please, Ian. This is in the south of the site, the other major new neighbourhood park, called, and you can see it on the screen there, Park Kevin Gavelach. So this has got, again, similar approach to extensive new play provision, the biking track that Simon referenced earlier, retained vegetation, and the linkages from to the surrounding houses and the strong overlooking from the new houses. Next one, please, Ian. This is a general view, just again, of this spine street. You've heard me say before, 1.5 kilometers. It's not a bypass. This is a street that's emphasized as part of the living environment. So this is lined by building frontages, active frontages, we call them, building windows, house windows, front doors, flats with balconies. There will be a cycle route along one side, so you don't have to cycle on the carriageway. There's bus stops. There are designated crossing points. There's street trees all the way along, and shallow ditches for water management. So it brings it all together as a significant new linear green space. Next slide, please. This is that northeastern entrance onto Llangefellach Road that Simon referenced. This is where the new spine street has to climb up from the existing road. It can't be developed because of the gradients there, but it can create a fantastic new green space. It's not necessarily about public access in this area. It's very much about landscape and habitat creation. Next one, please. This is the opposite end of the spine street down to the southwest, where it meets the Penderry ward. So there's no phases of development down this end at this stage. Eventually, this will all be opened up. This shows how the consistency of that spine street treatment, the consistency of the active travel route, the cycle route along the footpath there I was referring to, the street trees, and some of these dry attenuation areas all comes all the way through. This is the kind of green matrix that joins this new space together, and importantly, joins these communities together. Next one, please, Simon. So quickly, just jumping back to this plan, just to remind ourselves, this is about 171 new homes. So that's a significant, probably one of the largest planning applications for detail that we've seen for a number of years. And just to remind you that it's about a range of houses. There's not just one single type, and it's about a range of character, a range of different materials. So just jumping from this slide to the next one, please. Again. So this, just quickly to say, the houses will not look all the same. They will not be 171 versions of this house, but this is just to remind us that there's 8 different approaches to character across the site. So some houses will have brick, some houses will have render, some houses will have cast stone, it's called, referencing the old traditional stone. There will be a consistent theme of gables. Again, they're a strong theme of Swansea, generally these gables on the fronts of houses, and a strong theme of this new place. And there will be use of feature bands, as they're called, feature bands around windows, and feature elements of architecture on key frontages. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So this gives you an idea of the range of house types proposed on site with those material variations I referred to earlier. You've got the flats there on the top left with balconies. Every flat will have its own balcony. That's very important for the amenity space. Something we learned during the COVID lockdown. You don't want to be cooped up in a flat with no space that belongs to you. So they will all have balconies. You can see the consistency of the architectural approach between the apartments and the other house types, as well as some of these units will be affordable housing, and they will be indistinguishable through their architectural treatments. We've got 2-bed houses, we've got 3-bed houses, and we've got the 3-story townhouses there. Key features to note as well is the consistent use of grey windows and the fact that there were large windows letting in decent natural light into these new homes. Next one, please. And this is how they all start to fit together on site. A number of example street scenes. The top street scene across there is the frontage onto that park Kevin Gavelach that we talked about before, which is that southern neighbourhood park, which shows a 3-story townhouse wrapping around to other homes of different sizes. You can see the consistent use of gables in that area there. The middle street seen there is the frontage, the key frontage onto that spine street. You've heard me refer to that before with the importance of the active frontage, the windows and doors facing that street, and the larger scale of houses helping to define that key route. And the bottom view there is a typical view, just generally within the site, showing how it all fits together with the different house types, the different materials, and it forms a coherent place. And you can also see some of those corner turning houses there, roughly in the middle of the screen at the bottom, with the windows in the side gable. Next one, please. So there, this is almost the end of my slides. So this shows how it all comes together. These are some of the CGI three-dimensional village images that give you an idea of how these houses could look. They mainly focus on the red brick house types. As I mentioned before, there will be render houses, there will be stone houses. You can see those linking features of the large windows and the gable features. And just to say, we've obviously had a long and really positive discussion with Landmore Homes, and in parallel with this discussion, they've decided to redesign their whole house type range. It wasn't just due to Swansea discussions, it was linked into the wider discussions around the changes to building regulations, but it gave them an opportunity to refresh their whole house type range. So they took the very tried and tested, very familiar house types, the quality in the space that people expect, and refresh them to a more contemporary feel. And I think it's a very positive approach and very positive outcome to the collaboration that we've had. And the last slide, please. So this is the last slide for me. This is that Spine Street area just adjacent to the local centre and the school that I referenced earlier. There will be more going on in the green space here than this image suggests. There's some retained hedges and there's more planting to go in. But this starts to show how the new place will come together, the scale of homes, the quality and character of those new homes, ultimately forming a very important new neighbourhood for Swansea. And as I said before, this is the result of positive dialogue with Landmore Homes and their team. And it exemplifies this placemaking approach that's very important in Swansea and important across the entirety of Wales. And ultimately, it's all about creating a new neighbourhood. And that isn't just a new neighbourhood for new residents, it's about linking in with existing communities as well. And overall, this scheme has positively embraced all of the discussions, all of the agendas. The outcomes are positive from a placemaking approach. And on that note, I will hand back over to Simon to cover any final planning aspects. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Steve. That's great. Okay. In terms of residential amenity, the vast majority of the site would not directly adjoin existing properties. Where the development would adjoin existing occupiers, satisfactory separation distances would be maintained to garden boundaries and dwellings, such that there would be no significant amenity impacts. The applicant has worked extensively with officers in order to address concerns in relating to achieving satisfactory separation distances internally across the site. Ian, if you could go forward. Yeah, that's great. So what we're displaying there is just a section through part of the site, which again shows some challenging levels. But the minimum 21 metre back-to-back separation distance set out within the SPG are achieved throughout the site. And where there is a change in levels, separation distances are generally increased as set out within the placemaking guidance SPG. Design solutions have also been used, including the introduction of higher boundary treatments, tree planting along common boundaries, and designing longer gardens for lower properties to mitigate any significant adverse overlooking impacts. There are instances around the site where the full 15-metre back-to-side distance would not be achieved between proposed dwellings. However, this is considered to be acceptable given the high placemaking quality of the scheme and that the scheme was originally developed and submitted based on the guidance within the previous design guide SPG, which required a minimum back-to-side distance of 12.5 metres. The size of the private gardens throughout the development is considered to be acceptable and would accord with the Council's placemaking guidance in this respect. The size of the homes has been considered against the Council's placemaking SPG, and while several of the sizes of the proposed dwellings compare favourably to the guidance, there are some instances where house types would fall below these standards. These have been reviewed and are not considered to be excessively cramped and are therefore considered to be acceptable in the round given the overall placemaking quality of the scheme. In terms of highway safety, the Spine Street would have a strategic function, but as Steve said, The tree-lined nature of the street with an active travel route on one side would ensure that it still functions as an attractive landscaped space. The application has been accompanied by visibility and tracking information throughout the site to ensure tree placements are acceptable and to ensure the proposed streets generally function without resulting in harmful highway safety impacts. The local highway authority note that some widening may be required on the bends of the spine street and that tree placement would not be permitted within the forward visibility envelope on approach to the zebra crossing or within 6 metres of a lighting column. These matters can be addressed further if necessary. Off-street parking within the development would be provided within carports, garages and off-street spaces. On-street visitor spaces are indicated throughout the scheme. The level of parking across the site is considered to be acceptable, having regard to the guidance within the Council's Parking Standards SPG. Overall, the Highway Authority has not raised any objections to the proposed development. In terms of affordable housing, this will be provided in accordance with the Section 106 agreement attached to the outline and will be provided as 1 and 2 bed flats on the Spine Street frontages and as 2 and 3 bed homes arranged as in semi-detached pairs. The design of the affordable housing matches the overall contemporary aesthetic and is well integrated within the site in accordance with LDP policies. Council's housing section have confirmed that the proposed affordable housing would be acceptable in terms of its location, mix of properties, type and tenure. Within this reserved matters submission, the applicant has submitted information to satisfy a number of the conditions on the outline permission, namely those relating to levels, parking details, street furniture, mine entries, green infrastructure, landscape and ecological management plan, construction environmental management plan, foul water disposal, potable water, arboricultural impact assessment and tree protection plan, tree protection measures, public art strategy, and landscape and implementation management plan. These matters have been subject to consultations with internal and external consultees and are considered to be acceptable as set out within the officer's report and update sheet. The applicant has provided surface water drainage details for the development to satisfy the requirements of the conditions on the outline. However, discussions on these matters are ongoing with the Council's drainage section. As such, details will be agreed prior to the commencement of development as required by the outline planning conditions. In response to the letter of objection, concerns have been raised in relation to flooding of Penplas Road and its use for construction traffic. While Penplas Road is adopted, vehicle access is restricted and there are no proposals to use this access for construction vehicles or vehicles when the development is occupied. Penplas Road would be used as an active travel link when the development is occupied. A comprehensive surface water strategy for the development and accompanying details are being discussed with the applicant. However, as noted previously, the Section 106 includes a contribution to improve the receiving watercourse, and this, together with an approved drainage strategy, would offer catchment flood risk benefits. This was acknowledged at the outline stage. On this basis, it's considered the concerns relating to these matters would not render the scheme unacceptable. To conclude, the proposal would provide a high-quality development that has been reached following extensive collaborative work with the applicant. The proposals clearly follow through from the high-level principles and parameters of the outline and sub-area master planning stages and will deliver the first phases of a development that will provide new homes and a new community in this part of Swansea. Subject to conditions, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much both for a thorough presentation. Councillor Tribe, as one of the ward members, wishes to address us.
Good afternoon all.
Thank
you
you.
for the opportunity. A couple of concerns we have locally is have there been any surveys of the effect on traffic? Because for approximately 4 hours a day, the B4489 is a no-go area. It's just off junction 46 of the M4. We also have to live with the DVLA traffic. So between the hours of 8 and, well, say 7:30 and 9:30 in the morning, between 4 and 6, that road is a nightmare. With the Spine Road, it would alleviate the traffic off Swansea Road, but then it would cause a bottleneck at Carethin traffic lights, and then furthermore onto Forest Park traffic lights. I just wonder if that's been taken into consideration. That's question one. Have there been any surveys on the effect of the traffic with this proposed development?
Is that you finished now, councillor?
No.
Oh.
Also, just to let you know that the access from the northern area is off Swansea Road. It's not Llangefellach Road. And apparently there are some traffic lights being installed to facilitate this. Currently, opposite the northern access on Swansea Road, we have cottages and terrace properties where people are parking their cars outside their own homes. As there's no off-road parking, this won't be possible if there are traffic lights installed there. And finally, which ward would that come under? Would it be a Llangefellach ward, or would it be a Penderry ward once completed? And that's about it at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll come back to you in a moment after some members wish to speak. Councillor Jones.
Thank you. I've got quite a few questions myself. The first one is a plea, really. Trees, lots and lots of trees, lovely. Please can we ensure that they are suitable for the areas that they're going to be planted, i.e. not a huge tree outside somebody's very small dwelling and small trees outside somebody's very big dwelling, because that has happened already in other parts of the Swansea. So a plea to have suitable trees for the suitable area. Steve mentioned a few times about this is not going to be a bypass the Spine Road. How is it going to be stopped? Because I couldn't find anything to say about any type of traffic calming. And also Steve mentioned quite a number of times bus stops, and I see there's a reference to bus stops, street furniture, etc. But is the bus going through it? Is it at the either end that there are normal service buses? Because we all know we can't get a bus these days. They're very, very difficult. They're not running as they should because of shortage of drivers. And it was very interesting to see him plugging bus stops and buses, and yet it doesn't say what the buses are going to do. I've got to say my bit, the attenuation ponds, especially in the play area, the park, I think they're dangerous. On a day like today, they would fill up so quickly. And there's no covers on them. I do think we're asking for trouble. Also, is the site going to be adopted by the council for the roads, the street lighting, etc.? Because I know a lot of new sites are not adopted and there's management companies, so I'd like to know that. And the last one, Steve again, sorry Steve, made reference to stone cladding. I just hope you're not using the same stone cladding as we've got in the student village, because it's all falling off and we're having a terrible job to get it rectified. And because it's out of time with some people, the builders yearly guarantee, it's just impossible to get St Modwen to address it. I'm not having a pop at St Modwen. What I meant is they are trying as well, and it's a nightmare. And these people are living with bits falling off all the time.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, if you go on to up to Coed Darcy, you see the cladding falling off St Modwen buildings there as well. When this came to planning, I expressed very strong concerns about the traffic, and I reiterate those concerns now. Councillor Tribe has done that, but it isn't just area around Llangefellach and the M4 which is the problem. You're effectively looking at 2,000 houses on this site, which as a conservative estimate, an extra 4,000 cars on the road, all going either down Llangefellach Road or down via Pentragethyn Road to get into the city centre. Now, at the moment, if you try go down Llangefellach Road at a rush hour, you get to the lights at Hillvee, but that is already chock-a-block. Brynhydryn Square is an absolute nightmare as it is now. And if you try going down Pentragethyn Road, then it can push you down towards up to Cumbulla roundabout, which is also very, very busy at rush hour. So really, there doesn't appear to be any allowances made in the traffic assessment of this application in the original outline or now as to how you're going to deal with those extra 4,000 plus cars, which will be going down those two spine roads into Swansea, into very, very strongly already congested areas where you already have to wait 10, 15 minutes to get through Brynnyfed lights or through the lights at Hailey, already have to wait 10, 15 minutes to get onto Cumbulla roundabout. And this is just going to add to that problem. So I think if you're going to approve these 2,000, well, we've already approved the 2,000, but we're going to have these 2,000 houses here, there needs to be some provision at those bottleneck points on the way into Swansea, which is not being put into place on this planning application at the moment, and has not been put into place when we did the outline application. Highways do need to address this urgently, or it's going to just add to the problems as these houses come on stream.
Yes, thank you, Chair. First of all, can I perhaps Simon elaborate on what he means by a pocket park, which is obviously on page 22. And on page 31, still on the theme of parks, Chair, rather concerned that the equipment is going to be provided because it's going to be wooden equipment, which obviously our parks are saying they're not going to maintain. Now, if you're going to have such a big development, so a new community in effect, why can't we encourage the developer to put equipment there that's going to be obviously fit for purpose, and it's not going to end up getting deteriorated and obviously going to fall into disrepair quite quickly. And if I could turn to page 44, Simon has 47, 48. Simon has already touched on it, Chair, in regards to the housing of the Chelsea style. As he said, quite rightly said, if this was put in prior to our new SPG, I know that we've got to have another 17,500 houses within Swansea because of the growth, and as I say, then this is one of the probably the biggest site that we've gone through the LDP. But in regards to the size of the Chelsea, it's quite clearly stated, which says it's below the space standard recommended, which is a current now SPG. But if this had come prior to after the new SPG, we would have obviously said, they've got to comply with the proper regs. So what I would like to ask, if possible, obviously the developer is obviously, because of the cost, it might be trying to look at cross-cutting corners, and obviously perhaps putting costs and profit before perhaps the standard of living accommodation. And on another point, which I'd like to ask perhaps Jonathan as well, that seeing as this we've accepted this and gone through on the style of houses in Chelsea, which has obviously been said that obviously, because of the concerns with the space of the living accommodation, that we are not going to set a precedent on this, that another big developer can't come in and say, well, you allowed it there, why can't you allow it here? So that's an issue that I would perhaps some clarification on that, if possible. And as I say, if Simon or Jonathan can perhaps address those points, Chair, I'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we can. Oh, sorry, I pass it down in.
Thank you, Chair. That's what happens when you stay in the house. You can't see me. Yeah, a lot of what I was going to say has already been said. But first of all, reading the LDP as well, can somebody explain to me the difference between a spine street and a spine road? And saying that, Stephen has already said it's not going to be a bypass, and it has already been asked, how can you be certain it's not going to be used as a bypass? Because, like already been said, I use this route very often when I pick Mike White up. And once this development goes, I think he'll have to walk to the Guildhall. So how do you do that? The other thing is, you're on about that they will build a primary school. What pressures will be on our secondary schools of education? Come back with any of that. My next thing was size of the trees and the size the roots will grow. But Mary has Ray Jones has already said that as well. And also, will the road, as the developer indicated that the roads will be put up for adoption, and also will the play areas will be put up for adoption as well. And also, I know on especially LDP, we got measuring devices on journey times. So what effect would this have with all these extra cars on the road affecting the journey times of this area? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got no other hands. Oh, Councillor Lewis, sorry.
Well, Chairman, the question is actually Mary is quite right, because in her ward there was a friend of mine at a house there, and the tree was bigger than the garden, you know, and it was going to be listed. But fortunately, the committee saw common sense on that. But the other question is this: obviously, how much is this? How much is are we getting from our 106? What are the conditions? Because I know on one particular site where they were going to hit big development was coming in, and providing they didn't go over 450 hours, I think it is, they didn't have to pay anything. Now, is it, when do we start? Do we get any money out of this? I know, but how much?
Yeah.
And when?
Okay, we'll come back with all those answers, hopefully. Who wants to go first? Highways or?
Yeah.
All right, that's Simon, yeah.
Okay, quite a few things to respond to on there. I mean, mainly I think the first one in terms of Councillor Tribe was discussing the highway impact of the development. Obviously, this is a reserve matters application that flows from the original outline that was granted. So this specific application hasn't been accompanied by a transport assessment. That was all undertaken at the outline stage when the principle of 1,950 or up to 1,950 dwellings was approved, and obviously this is an allocated site within the LDP. So those sort of high-level highway and traffic impacts have all been considered previously under the outline consent. I can just read you a paragraph, if you like, from the original outline application, which sort of discusses broadly the highway safety and traffic impacts. It says it's considered that the development would have a significant impact on the existing highway infrastructure in Llangefellach. However, the location and accessibility of the site are considered to be good, and the presence of a new primary school on the site is of significant benefit to internalise education trips and improve the overall accessibility and sustainability of the site. Improvements and enhancements to existing bus services have also been put forward to improve access and public transport. The site was promoted in the LDP as it's anticipated that the Spine Street would remove existing traffic from Mynydd Junction, as many cars would utilise the strategic access road, and improvements are also proposed to existing junctions in the vicinity, but not junction 46 of the M4. Broadly, what I'm saying is the traffic impacts of the development were considered at the outline stage. This is the detail of the housing that we're looking at now.
Sorry, Chair, there's no reference to Bryn Hyfryd or Pentrygethyn Road or Cumberland Roundabout in that assessment, and he's also just indicates that the Spine Road will be used as a bypass. So,
specifically in terms of the outline, again, I mean, contributions were secured under the Section 106 agreement attached to the outline. There was off-site highway infrastructure contributions of £385,000 that was secured through the outline for improvements to Kerrything Cross, Forestbar Cross, Cocket Road, Cumbach Road, increasing footway along Newydd Road, Pelican crossings, and design fees associated with that. So again, you know, the impacts that were identified at the outline stage were were mitigated through those contributions, and the triggers are all set out within the section 106. Specifically turning to the bus concerns, again, there was a large contribution to provide a bus service within the outline, contribution of 1,020,000 towards the procurement of public transport to serve the development. So again, that was secured through the outline. In relation to trees, obviously a detailed landscaping scheme has been put forward by the applicants, landscaping architects. There's been no objection from the council's tree officer in relation to the scheme. Attenuation ponds, obviously they're something that we see all the time now on new developments, so that that's nothing new, and that their safety is considered to be acceptable. In terms of the roads within the site, will they be adopted? Yes, that's certainly the intention of the applicant. They will look to offer the roads for adoption by the council, and that is obviously a separate process to the planning process. In relation to the cladding, obviously note what you say in terms of the other developments that you've seen. Obviously, as part of this application, we've put in condition on requiring details of large-scale details of the materials and approval of the materials. So that's something that we'll look at that stage. But obviously we can't, in terms of craftsmanship and workmanship, that's not something we can make sure they do on site. That's we approve these details in the knowledge that they should be complied with. There's a query about what a pocket park is. It's essentially a sort of small open space area, a dwelling area, a dwelling spot to sit and relax. You'll see a couple of those within the site, together with the larger parks, which Steve referenced within his presentation. In terms of the equipment, obviously, as part of the application, the applicant did submit details of wooden equipment, and parks have expressed concerns around that approach. So there'll be further dialogue with the applicant on that. Parks have obviously indicated that they've got a certain preference. So that is reserved by condition, and we will have further discussions with the applicant and our Parks Department. But just to clarify, the intention of the developer is for those parks to be adopted. So obviously it would make sense to have our parks sign off on those materials and the play equipment at that stage. So that's reserved by condition. Councillor Downing expressed concerns regarding potential for the Spine Street to be used as a bypass. I think to ask for clarification. Yeah, Councillor Downing did as well. To my mind, and Steve will emphasise this. We're talking about making streets places that people live rather than bypass roads, and that's why that road isn't just a straight alignment road with no trees. It's not an engineered infrastructure feature that is simply to convey traffic. It's got green infrastructure. It's got active travel on one side of it. And as I've said in my report and presentation, it's actually a landscaped area in itself. So that's, to me, that's what a spine street is rather than a spine road. In terms of pressures on local schools, as part of the outline application, those detailed discussions with our education section at that time. So as well as providing a two-form entry primary school on the site, there is also contributions to secondary provision as well. So those were all agreed through the Section 106 agreement in consultation with the Council's education section. So there is provision there to deal with the spaces generated from the development. I think that's the main points there. Any more?
Thank you very much. Mark, did you want to, any contribution?
Thank you, Chair. I think
Sorry,
Simon.
House.
I'll come back to you. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, was it house types you were talking about?
Oh, yeah, just a moment, Matt.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I mean, in the report, we've highlighted that there was a specific house type that was below our sort of guidance that we've got. You know, I mean, as we said in the report, it is below the standard. You know, we looked at that carefully. Don't consider that it would result in an overly cramped house in terms of it's got an open plan layout. The houses are generally well designed with open plan areas, French doors out onto the gardens that are provided. So whilst strictly it doesn't accord with the guidance within the SPG, the house type that's specifically referenced is considered to be acceptable. You know, in the overall balance, I mean, these developers often provide smaller house types because they do provide a cheaper form of accommodation for those who can't afford larger houses. So you know, it's a sort of very much a starter home that will appeal to those looking for a first home or those looking to significantly downsize. So yeah, note what you're saying, but in the overall balancing exercise, we're satisfied that it wouldn't result in any significant impacts upon the future living conditions of the future occupiers. And in terms of whether it would set a precedent, obviously now that the SPG is there, and we're scrutinising the space standards within these houses. So you know, every development will be considered against that guidance. The problems that we would have is if there was a very high proportion of houses within a development that did not accord with the standards that we have.
Okay. So you're confident then that the challenge can and that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Matt, I could bring you in now. Was there anything you wanted to contribute?
I think Simon summed up pretty well. Obviously, we considered the overall traffic impact as part of the outline. Councillor Downing mentioned journey times. That's one of a number of metrics that we measure. Naturally, you put more cars on the network, journey times increase. The developers via contribution is paying for highway improvements, public transport improvements, active travel improvements, and all of those will bring us down to where we would have been anyway. Councillor Tribe mentioned the access junction on Swansea Road. Obviously, the provision of a new access onto the public highway is subject to agreement with the Highway Authority. They are in, I believe, their agreements at the minute, and there's a whole technical approval process that needs to go on in the background before they can access the site. Obviously, as ward member, you will be consulted on as soon as we've got a plan on that, so that we can make sure that it's not affecting your residents, Councillor.
Okay.
Councillor Jones mentioned adoption. They have indicated that they do want to offer the site for adoption, and the layout as presented appears on the face of it to be suitable for adoption. Obviously, it's not a mandatory process. The developer must offer it up, and then we would determine whether we want it. But at the minute, it appears as though the layout itself is a good candidate for adoption. So I can't see any reason, should the developer offer it up, why we wouldn't take it on.
Oh, thank you very much, Jonathan. The legal thing, anything?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm just going to confirm really what Simon said. The developer would have to take into account the SPG that was in force at the time when they're bringing up the development. So it wouldn't set a precedent because we considered the guidance which is in force with the letter standard. Developments going forward would have to take into account the latest SPG. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Stephen, got your hand up there?
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to expand a little bit more on the question around Spine Street versus bypass. I think just to say, traditionally bypasses, and we'll all be familiar with those sorts of routes that were created in the 1990s, maybe, where typically a bypass would be designed to get as many vehicles from one place to another as quickly as possible, with a minimum of things happening. Just so there would be no buildings. It would generally be very limited in terms of planting. The difference is, and it's a key premise of the Swansea Local Development Plan and a key element of some of the other schemes that have gone through planning committees such as Park Mawr, and I remember we had similar discussions there, where a spine street is a linear place fronted by buildings. So a spine street, such as the example here for this strategic site, would be lined by the active frontages, by the windows and doors, the front living rooms of homes. It would be it would include provision for active travel, which is walking and cycling. It would have extensive trees and planting within the public domain, so not within people's private front gardens, within the public verges maintained by the council. So overall, it would be this linear place that accommodates the through traffic without allowing it to dominate. And that's the balance we need to achieve. And that's where the national transportation agendas are going, is to make sure we're creating places and make sure we're accommodating all forms of movement, not just allowing private cars to dominate. And that's the balance that this scheme positively achieves. I'll just quickly, a couple of other things. Councillor Jones mentioned about trees, and I know we've had this discussion before. It's very much about the right tree in the right place. As Simon mentioned, there's a very comprehensive landscaping plan for this scheme, where appropriate trees will have root guards in the ground to stop them damaging surfaces. And generally, all the trees we're talking about, the important trees, will be in the public realm. So they will be maintained by the council, and they will be sufficiently far away from homes so they're a positive asset and not a concern for leaf fall and natural light. And finally, the stone cladding that Councillor Jones mentioned. I know the site you're talking about. This is a completely different developer and a completely different product. So I'm confident we won't have any problems like that. And all the materials are covered by conditions to be agreed in detail. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. Councillor Downing, you wanted to come back in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's still this thing that maybe I'm a bit slow, the difference between when is a street not a road and when is a road not a street. And the other thing, are you saying that a spine street, then you wouldn't see an articulated lorry going up a spine street? Or are we putting weight restrictions to stop that from happening? Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think maybe we're using the wrong phrase in terms of bypass. I think we're looking at a rat run here. Unless you do proper traffic calming on this spine street, it will be used as a rat run. I think that needs to be addressed. My concern about the traffic impact on Bryn Hyfryd and Cumberland roundabout, though, has not been addressed in the replies, Chair.
Just to Matt, if possibly, if in regards to the 106 funding, in regards to the traffic plan, seeing as this development is going to come through sort of 3 wards and there's going to be pinch points, as I say, Conker Salem, Roderick Square, Pendergast Road there, would those ward councillors have any input as to where measures could possibly be looked at, if possible?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the 106 is prescriptive in terms of what the money is going to be spent on. But yeah, I mean, certainly within that, then yes, I can't see a reason why not. Sorry, my computer's.
Yeah, so I can make a sort of a general observation. I mean, with 2,000 houses, we're talking about really about a small town being set up. And in that place there, if we've addressed the situation with schools, but if each house had 1 child, I mean, that's 1,000 children. That's 2 large primary schools and a comprehensive school. And in addition to that, I mean, it's like a population explosion as well. You know, I haven't considered something like shops or community centres, libraries, and those kinds of issues that would need to be placed there. I noticed parks have been there. Forgive me if that's already been covered in the in the document. I read it quite some time ago, and I think I've forgotten most of it. I know, but it's just an observation that I'm.
Is there anything you wanted to add about the particular impact on Cumbola and
Yeah, obviously, thank you, Chair. The obviously the looking at the traffic impact started some time ago and was considered under the outline, starting off with sort of whole area county-wide traffic models, and that can pinpoint exactly where your issues are going to be, where this additional traffic is going to load onto, and where you need to focus your efforts in terms of 106 money in order to pull that traffic situation back to where we'd be anyway if nobody had built anything. I mean, obviously, I didn't revisit the outline before coming in today because instead that's already been considered. But I'd be quite willing to have a sit down with some of the members if they'd like to run through it again.
Yeah, it wasn't addressed in the outline. Claire raised this at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Steve, you got your hand up there, or is that an old hand?
So just if it's okay, Chair, just to the question about the through traffic on the spine street. My understanding is yes, it would be open to HGVs, but there wouldn't be a significant proportion of HGVs. So you would have larger lorries going through, but not dominating. Traffic calming wise, this kind of route would be generally maybe 30 miles an hour, potentially the way things are going across lots of Wales down to 20 miles an hour in possibly the whole route, maybe key sections, certainly across where there's the new local centre, if you can remember that master plan there. There will be, I think the other question I was just going to respond to there, the further phases of this new place will have a new school, will have a new local centre, which would include facilities such as shops, maybe further pubs. You know, it isn't defined, but there is a zone for sufficient space for all those facilities, as you say, that effectively this whole new community would need in a central accessible location that you can get to via walking, cycling, public transport, as well as accommodating private cars. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, no one else wishes to speak, and I'm afraid
yes,
we can't let you back in. I'm afraid, Councillor.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. No, my apologies.
Still haven't had an answer.
Hmm?
I still haven't had an answer.
He's going to sit down.
I mean, is there no answer?
He's sitting down.
Yeah.
He's
Off
sitting
the
down
top of
with
my
him.
head, I don't know, Councillor. So I haven't revisited what was provided under the outline because that was considered under the outline. But I'm quite willing to have a little sit down with you once I've accessed the relevant information, and we'll go through it.
Yeah, I've just got the outline report up, and in the highway section it says analysis has been undertaken of junctions surrounding the site, and they listed the junctions: Llangabelach Road, Healdee, Brynhyfryd Square, Ravenhill Road, Pendragethin Road, Carmarthen Road, Ravenhill Road, and the M4 junction 46, Llangabelach Road and Healdee. And in the report, it goes through each of those junctions and outlines what issues were identified and how they were addressed. So that was part of the outline. Brynhyfryd, which I think was one of the areas you mentioned, Carmarthen Road. So that was considered in the transport analysis submitted as part of the outline application.
Okay. I just don't. I remember this debate quite clearly that you know it was mentioned, but there was absolutely no proposals put in there to how they're going to address it, and that's my concern. You know, it's going to impact on my ward in particular, and that's why I'm concerned. And Mike's ward, and of course, Mike over his ward as well. Yeah.
Sorry, I want to go back to the buses. I didn't really have an answer. On page 47, it says access and highway safety, and it says that there's a improvements and enhancements to existing bus services have also been put forward to improve access to public transport. It says it's been put forward, doesn't say that it's been agreed or anything. And it also says about the money, the allocation of the money is towards procurement of public transport to serve the development in year one initially, with a balance to be spread over 2 to 4 years. So after that, I'm assuming there's no money. Now I know, again, through experience, it's all very well, you advertise a site with a bus and then you get the cutbacks because the council are not there putting money in themselves, and it's not a profitable route, so it's withdrawn. So it's advertising something that may not be able to continue. And also at the very bottom of the same paragraph, it says, this site was promoted in the LDP as it is anticipated that the Spine Street would remove existing traffic from Minnespark Junction, as many cars would utilise the strategic access road. So it is not a bypass, as we know, like round the street, but it is going to bypass, and it's going to be extremely busy going through a residential area.
Okay, thank you all, and thank you for contributions. And yeah, well, it does say that there's a money set aside. It's original.
Yes,
Was.
it's set out in the section 106 to
It is
provide
there,
that funding. So that's agreed. And there's
is, isn't it?
trigger
Yeah,
points that
I
they
can
have
remember
to
it in the past.
provide that.
Mm.
It says it be put forward, so it doesn't say it's agreed to.
It was agreed in the outline.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Absolutely, Joe. I can just confirm as well. Yeah, I've got the section 106. It is detailed the triggers for the bus contributions. Yeah, and the developers have agreed it.
Well, that's national, isn't it? But yeah, no, but yeah, thank you all, and thank you for your contributions and presentations. Absolutely good discussion. But we do have to remember there's an outline which has already been agreed. What we're looking at now is the design of this phase, and that's what we'll be voting on. Everything else, you know, has already been discussed in the outline and in the LDP. So the recommendation there is to approve, and we will now take a vote on that.
Yep. Councillor Peter Black,
Against.
Phil Downing, for Alan Jeffrey,
For.
Mary Jones,
For.
Mike Lewis,
Or
Richard Lewis, Nicola Matthews,
For.
Mike White, and Paul Lloyd.
Oh,
7-4-2 against, Chair.
that's carried. And then we move on to the next item 2, which is on page 67 at Morver Industrial Estate. Thank you. And you're against that.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Just refer you again to the update sheet. There's a condition within the update sheet in relation to the provision of a flood risk management plan that's referenced within the report, but has not been included within the conditions schedule. It's recommended that this condition should be imposed if approved. This application is reported to committee as it's considered to be a departure to the LDP, specifically in relation to RP5 relating to flood risk. The development is for an extension to an existing commercial premises at AA Catering Foods Limited, Alamein Road, within Morver Industrial Estate. The proposals for a single-storey rear extension to facilitate a refrigeration unit at the rear of the existing industrial unit. The extension will measure 9 metres deep by 14 metres wide with a shallow lean-to roof. The application was advertised by a press notice and by notifying neighbouring occupiers. No responses were received. The key LDP policies that are relevant to the consideration of this proposal are PS2, placemaking and place management, and RP5, avoidance of flood risk. Other relevant policies in relation to the highway safety and ecology are referenced within the officer's report. Ian, if you could put up slide 1, site location plan. This shows the site location plan with the application site outlined in red. It's one of a number of similar units accessed off Alamein Road. Put slide 2 up. This is an aerial image which gives better context for the site. The site is marked with a red cross. You can see there. You can see the River Tower to the south and east, and the park and ride to the west. Next slide, please, Ian. This shows the proposed extension to the rear of the building, extending out to the same width as the host building. Note the depth is proportionate to the scale of the existing building. Next slide, please, Ian. This shows the front elevation on the left, and the rear elevation of the building on the right. And next slide. This next slide shows the proposed side elevation at the top of the page with the monopitched extension projecting out to the rear in blue. The bottom image is the proposed rear elevation. The main issue in terms of the consideration of this application is the potential impact of the development upon flood risk and whether the consequences of flooding are acceptable. Matters relating to visual amenity and residential amenity are discussed within the officer's report and are considered to be acceptable given the relatively modest scale of the development and the overall industrial and commercial context. In relation to access and highway safety, whilst the local highway authority have requested further information in relation to parking and access within the site, this is not considered to be necessary, given that parking bays are already demarcated on the site and there are already large roller shutter doors at the side of the building, which indicate deliveries of large goods would take place on the northern side of the building as existing. In relation to ecological enhancements, the applicant is proposing bat and bird boxes that can be seen on that rear elevation and wildflower planting at the rear. Planning ecologist has confirmed that the location of the bat and bird boxes are acceptable and the provision of these enhancements is proposed to be secured by a condition. In relation to flood risk, the application site is located within C1 of the development advice maps within TAN 15. If you could go to the next slide, please, Ian. This is shown on the slide. This C1 zone is shown on the slide in green with the site indicated in the red dot. Perhaps you want to highlight that, Ian. It's a bit small. The C1 flood zone relates to areas of floodplain which are developed and served by significant infrastructure, including flood defences, and states that development can take place subject to the application of the justification tests, including the acceptability of consequences. The site is considered to be within an established industrial area and would contribute to key employment objectives within the LDP. The site is also previously developed land and would therefore comply with the relevant justification tests within TAN 15. In relation to the consequences of flooding, the application has been accompanied by a flooding consequences assessment, which indicates the building would be flood-free in the 1 in 100 year event, and that flood events up to the 1 in 1,000 year event would meet the criteria to be considered acceptable, set out within A115 of the TAN. The site will, however, flood in the 1 in 1,000 year event, with parts of the site exceeding the tolerable threshold of 1 metres for industrial development set out within the TAN. If you could put the next slide up, Ian. So you can just, you can see the site there with the purple cross. So that's the 1 in 1,000 year modelled flood event, which effectively shows the entire estate to be flooded up to and greater than 1 metre.
Yeah.
While not specifically objecting to the proposals, NRW have noted concerns and consider that inadequate information has been provided. Specifically, they're concerned that no hydraulic modelling has been carried out to demonstrate the development would not result in the loss of flood storage that would impact third parties. Despite this concern, NRW acknowledge and confirm within their consultation response that the extension is relatively small and unlikely to affect third parties. On this basis, and having regard to NRW's advice, it's considered the FSA is proportionate to the proposed development. While the development would result in a technical breach of the TAN 15 thresholds, it must be acknowledged that the site and much of the enterprise zone to the north and surrounding area would be affected by an extreme 1 in 1,000 year event. Consequences of flooding could be managed through early flood warnings and the provision of a flood risk management plan. Given that NRW acknowledge the development is unlikely to increase flooding elsewhere, this is considered to tip the balance in favour of approving the application, which would allow the applicant to expand the business and the potential to provide associated benefits to the local economy. On this basis, the application is recommended for approval subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Simon. One of the local members is here. Did you want to speak, Councillor?
Yes, just one point I'd like to ask, because it's going to be a big unit going in everything. As noise pollution I know this says there's no objection, but as perhaps soundproofing being sort of considered, I tell you why, because obviously it's not so much the houses that were within my side of the water closer, but across the river, you're looking at Copper Quarter, which is just across the road, which is obviously in Charesboard. Just a query really of soundproofing being considered.
Yeah, just a quick question, because I'm not clear from reading the report. In what way is it departure from the Swansea Local Development Plan? Because this is an industrial estate. I'm a bit confused about that. Yeah. Departure. Well, it's not very clear.
Jones, got your mic on?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just checking to see if pollution control were consulted as part of the application. Okay, so yeah, I can see that now. Okay, so we did consult. There was no objection. So I mean, in terms of the proposal, it's for a refrigeration unit. There's already an existing use there. In light of the pollution control not objecting to the scheme, I don't think it would be reasonable. There was no noise assessment submitted with the application. I don't think it would be reasonable to ask for that by condition. If there was, if the development did result in excessive noise disturbance, then that's something that could be dealt with under separate environmental health legislation, but I don't think it would be justified to ask for further noise information at this stage. In relation to why the development is a departure, policy RP5 of the LDP relates to flood risk, and it's linked to TAN 15. Because the development, it would be a technical departure to TAN 15. That's why it's reported, albeit that it's a minor departure.
I can't see any other hands up. That's all I'm asking before we go to.
Well done, Chairman.
No, all right. Okay, well, folks, you can see the. Thank you, Simon. You see the Sorry, thank you, Simon. You can see the recommendation there is one of approval. Now we'll take that vote now then.
Councillor Peter Black.
4.
Bill Downing. 4. Alan Jeffrey.
4.
Mary Jones.
4.
Mike Lewis.
4.
Richard Lewis.
4, Chairman.
Nicola Matthews.
4.
Mike White.
4.
Paul Lloyd.
4.
Unanimous, Chair.
Very much, that's unanimous. And thank you all for this afternoon for the meeting, and we've got another date set for the 6th of September. That's December. All right. I can say that again. We have another date set for the 6th of December. I wish it was September, yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much.